It's 2020. Let the games begin. What a way to start out the year, watching this melt up go crazy. Stock market breaking all-time highs. Dow Jones up 328 points. All this based on nothing. All this just a complete illusion. There's no fundamentals. There's no foundation to any of this. We're watching the economy get weaker while we're watching this melt up continue to go to the moon. And I don't know about you, but this is starting to get very, very scary. Watching these markets continue to explode on absolutely nothing but fake data and the backing of the Federal Reserve. I made a couple quick notes today. I'm going to try to make this video as quick as possible. But I wanted to touch base on what's happening. 2019 was the best year for global stocks since the last financial crisis. But we have to realize who and what played a large role in this melt up, and it was the Federal Reserve. We look back at 2019, we had 3 straight rate cuts. The last quarter of 2019, the Federal Reserve injected $1 trillion into the repo market. The Federal Reserve started purchasing in October of 2019, started purchasing $60 billion a month in Treasury bills. They said they will do that for the next 12 months. So they will continue to purchase Treasury bills. I believe they had to inject $58 billion into the repo market this morning. And so what I see coming into 2020 is the repo market will be on steroids. The Fed will continue to purchase Treasury bills, maybe increasing the amount of Treasury bills that they purchase. It may go from 60 million, maybe it goes to 80 million to 100 million. So again, the Fed is the buyer of last resort. And one thing we know as we enter 2020 here on this beautiful January 2nd, this beautiful evening, quantitative easing is alive and well. So as we continue to watch this illusion take place in front of our very eyes, this Ponzi scheme we call the stock market, as I'm watching people on Fox Business this morning telling me how great the economy is, how great the stock market is, inviting me to come in and be a part of the group. I read an interesting article by Michael Snyder today, and he made some points, and I just want to go through some of the points in the article. But in the article, he says, America today has more than 500,000 people living on the streets. So as we watch this melt up, as we watch this so-called economic boom, we have over 500,000 people living on the streets of America. 40 million people are living in poverty in the richest nation on planet Earth. 40 million. 50% of all U.S. workers make less than $33,000 a year. So please answer me this. How does this economy continue to boom? How do people continue to purchase things when half the country makes only $33,000 a year? And as we know, about half this country, 45%, have zero savings. So somebody please answer me this. How is this going to continue to go on? It's almost shocking that it's gone on this long. But we continue to be told that the economy is growing, that the economy is booming. We've had 14 years of economic growth below 3%. This is nothing to celebrate. It's actually very concerning. I think George Bush was actually president 14 years ago. So we'd have to go all the way back then to have economic growth above 3%. So 14 years, we've not been able to break 3%. An interesting fact is that 1% hold over half the wealth in the stock market. That's a very interesting fact. How could it not rise? The Fed has created trillions of dollars out of thin air, pumped the money into the financial markets, and of course, that was very good for stock prices. The Fed's balance sheet sits roughly at $4 trillion right now today, and look to that ballooning up to $4.5 trillion very, very soon. But even at $4 trillion and growing, at $4 trillion, that's quadruple the size that it was back in 2008. And remember, they're forecasting it to be, I think, around the first quarter of 2020 to be roughly $4.5 trillion. So as the Fed promised us a year ago that they were going to shrink the balance sheet, they were going to raise interest rates. Isn't it amazing how quickly all that changed? They cut rates. They expanded the balance sheet, and guess what? The balance sheet is going to expand more into 2020, and we're going to see more rate cuts in 2020. People don't understand that there is going to be a great price to pay for all of this manipulation. And unfortunately, many of your kids and grandkids are going to pay a very severe price for what we are doing right now. Do not believe that by pushing interest rates to the floor hasn't helped to inflate the bubble. So, I mean, just think, we cannot even normalize rates in this booming economy. So all these people that continue to tell me how great things are, why did we have to cut rates 3 straight times? Why can we not normalize rates? We're at 1.5 to 1.75, yet we're being told that this is the strongest economy of all time, yet we are going to be cutting rates to 0. 2020, I believe that we are going to hit 0 or be very, very close to 0% interest rates. Some people even thinking negative, but I'm going to go as far to say that it is a very big possibility that we could see 0% interest rates here in 2020. They have nothing left in the tool bag other than to cut interest rates and print more money. Do you really believe that that's a sign of a healthy economy? 0% interest rates and more quantitative easing. This economy cannot function on its own. They cannot take the training wheels off the bicycle. The training wheels are quantitative easing and low interest rates. They know if they stop doing this, that this whole thing crashes. All right, it absolutely crashes. Just think, if we had to raise rates right now, what would happen to this system? It is so fragile that even talking about raising rates starts affecting these markets immensely in the opposite direction. Just the mere mention of raising rates, even 25 basis points, would shock these markets. Michael made a very good point here. He says that people don't understand that high stock prices don't represent permanent wealth. Remember, this is me going back thinking when I was reading this article, if we went back to December of 2018, when the Fed raised rates 25 basis points, the market literally collapsed. Just think, again, how fragile these markets are, that just the mere thought of a rate hike, what it could do to these markets. So again, this stuff is built on top of quicksand. There's no fundamentals, there's no foundation to these markets, and that's why they cannot sustain a rate hike. And for all these people out there that keep telling you and I how great things are, why is the Fed injecting $1 trillion into the repo market? Why are they buying treasury bills? Why are they cutting rates? Why do we have more quantitative easing taking place if everything is okay? Why can't these markets, why can't this economy function on its own? It must have help. This Fed continues to give high dosages of medication to these markets, and eventually they're not going to react to these dosages any longer. And we're starting to find that out. Yes, the stock market's going up, but the economy is dying. You know, when they tell us that everyone in America is working, unemployment's at 3.6%. John Williams says it's 20. I'll let you decide. But one thing we know for certain is that many people are working side hustles. And what I mean by side hustles is they're working other jobs on top of their main job. So some people are working their main job, and then they're working 1, 2, maybe 3 side hustles on top of their job. So if things were so good, how come so many people are working 2, 3, and 4 jobs? How come half this country has no savings? How come so many people, millions of Americans, have no health care, no benefits? working 3 or 4 jobs and barely getting by. You know, when I drive through so many areas now in Southern California, I see 4, 5, 6, 7 cars parked in the driveway. I see cars parked all along the streets around the block of these neighborhoods. I go to an apartment complex in Orange County, California, and you can't even park down the street because there's just hundreds of cars parked on the streets in front of these apartments because so many people now have got to live together to just get by. Most Americans have no retirement savings also. Half of Americans' incomes now are literally going just to make the rent payment. So people are just working literally now just to pay their rent. It doesn't leave much money left over for food, for insurance, for an automobile, for much. Because now most people are working just to afford rent. And this is why we're seeing so many people living together today. So many people moving back in with their parents. So many people acquiring roommates. The cost of living is skyrocketing while most Americans' paychecks are not. And this is a big problem. In 10 years, we've added $10 trillion of debt. Household debt now is at $14+ trillion. Social Security, $13.9 trillion in unfunded obligations over the next 75 years. State and local pensions are short $6 trillion. U.S. debt is over $23 trillion. So again, we're being told that the economy is booming, but we are stealing from the future to stabilize the present. One thing that's rising faster than the stock market is the debt. If you truly believe that this economy is booming, how come nobody is talking about paying down the $23 trillion of debt? No one's talking about funding the unfunded pensions. Nobody's talking about funding the unfunded Social Security. If this economy is booming, how come we're not taking money and paying down the debt? How come we are running bigger debt and bigger deficits? We now have $1 trillion deficit. How come we are running giant debt and deficits if the economy is booming? How come we're not talking about paying down this $23 trillion to $22 trillion or to $20 trillion and then down to $19 trillion, getting it down to $17 trillion? There's no plan to pay down this debt because it's unsustainable. And obviously they know that. They're not telling you what's really going on. They're not telling you about this liquidity crisis in the repo market. We don't even hear anything about Deutsche Bank. We don't hear about the derivatives that Deutsche Bank's holding or the massive amount of derivatives that JP Morgan is holding. We don't even hear about that stuff anymore. All we hear about is how great things are doing. Yet the debt continues to spiral out of control, none of it getting paid down. We're watching people get farther and farther into debt. We're watching a pension crisis unfold. We're witnessing a retail apocalypse unfold. We're watching a country now that 70% of the GDP in this country is consumption. 12% of the GDP in this country is manufacturing. This should be like reversed. I mean, think about how can we sustain ourselves as a country, as an economy, when we don't make anything, when all we do is consume, and we're consuming things from other countries with money we don't have. How long do you think this can go on before we see serious ramifications from all this? I don't think it can go on much longer. I'm not saying this is going to happen tomorrow or next week, but we've dug a hole so deep that there's no way we're going to get out of this unscathed. There is going to be real pain to pay. We didn't want to pay the price in 2008. We didn't want to feel the pain in 2008. So what we did was we allowed the Federal Reserve to come in, print a lot of money, put us into a lot of debt because nobody wanted to feel the pain. We put it off. The day of reckoning is coming, and that day is going to come, and it's no longer going to be put off because nobody's going to be able to put it off. It is going to be so out of control that the Federal Reserve is not going to put it off. The medicine that they continue to use is losing its potency. And it is not going to have the same result that it had 12 years ago. So I make these videos to remind every one of you to make sure that you don't become complacent, to make sure that you are preparing, topping off all preparations, being awake, continuing to wake up friends and family, even though most won't listen. But we still have an obligation to wake up our fellow Americans. So I'm going to wrap it up right here. Enjoy the good times while they last, because the bad times are coming.